What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Touchdowns to Home Runs. I am so excited that you guys are here for this video. I got my college football Week 9 playoff rankings coming up for you guys, and I cannot wait. We had a great Week 8 of college football. The Big Ten got back in it. We saw Michigan have a big win versus Minnesota. It was good to see Ohio State playing again. We saw Indiana upset Penn State, who I'm pretty sure Penn State was number 10 in my last week's playoff rankings. So lots of good football in the Big Ten. SEC, Alabama was able to take on Tennessee and beat them by a pretty good margin. Texas A&M beat Mississippi State, I'm pretty sure. I know Georgia was on a bye. There was a bunch of other SEC teams on a bye that week. Other than that, Cincinnati had a big game versus SMU. They were able to win that one, so that was a big ranked matchup for them to win. So it was just a really good week of college football, but now we're getting into the really big and impactful games, and I cannot wait. This season, this whole college football season is just getting better and better as the week goes on, and I cannot wait to give you guys my predictions for right now in college football. So let's get into it. Coming in at my number 10 team is the Wisconsin Badgers. I got my whole 7, 8, 9, 10 teams down at the bottom. So 10, I have the Wisconsin Badgers. 9, I had the Florida Gators. 8, I had the Cincinnati Bearcats. And 7, I had the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Number 10, Wisconsin Badgers. They had a good win, 45-7 versus the Fighting Illinois. Last Friday night, they played a Friday night game. Graham Mertz played amazing, only one incompletion the whole game. Now, they have come across some rather unfortunate news. You never like to hear this in college football, especially this year, because Graham Mertz just got confirmed out for 3 weeks due to COVID, which is obviously not what you want to see. For a guy who came in and had an amazing first game, it just sucks for Wisconsin that he's out for at least 3 weeks with the coronavirus. Hopefully that is a fast recovery and everything. I wish the best for him, not just because of football, but you never want to see anyone get the virus. So best of luck to him. But Wisconsin is still a good team all around, and I think especially just after one game, they are a good team. I don't see me putting them any higher after one game, especially just beating Illinois. I don't think that they deserve anything more than 10, but can they definitely get higher than 10 in the future? 100%. They got some big games coming up. They play in Nebraska this weekend. Then they go play Purdue at home, and then they play in Michigan November 14th. So that's their first big game of the season. Let's see how they do in that game. They were able to beat Michigan last year. So, yeah, that's why I have Wisconsin coming in at number 10. My number 9 team, the Florida Gators. They haven't played in 2 weeks. The last game they played was a loss to Texas A&M in Texas A&M. That was a big loss for them, and that is the reason why they're so far down at the rankings from what they could be. They are 9 right now. In my rankings, they're 10 in the AP. But Florida is still a really good team. That offense is one of the best in college football, no question about it. They have a really good offense. Defense is where you find the holes for Florida and everything, where you'll find the mistakes. They go on to play Missouri this week at home, but this is a practice week. This is the prep week. They can't get too lazy in this game. They just need to go out there and play their style of football and put the game on their terms, and they'll be fine in this game against Missouri. Missouri has had a couple good wins recently. They beat Kentucky and they beat LSU recently, but it's the game after the game that will decide the SEC East. In my opinion, this 100% decides the SEC East. On November the 7th, we have the Georgia versus Florida game. Can't wait for that game. So that's the game that's going to really shift these rankings in the coming weeks. Whoever wins that game, that could either knock Florida out of the top 10 completely for me, or it could knock Georgia even out of the top 10 completely. Depends on how bad the win is. But this game, whoever wins that game is definitely going to be making a pretty big climb in the rankings for me. Next up, my number 8 team. How about them Cincinnati Bearcats? Undefeated. They just had a big win versus MSU. They go home to play Memphis this week. But the rest of that schedule, just looking at it, like you got Houston, ECU, UCF, Temple, and Tulsa to end off the season. Those are easy winnable games. As long as Cincinnati just keeps playing the way that they do, I could definitely see them being a top 6 team because they're probably going to be undefeated. I could definitely see them being undefeated at the end of the season, Cincinnati. So, can they make the playoff? It's hard to say if a group of 5 team can make the playoff. Right now, if Oklahoma State loses a game, I think that kicks out the Big 12 of the playoff. No question about it. There's no team that's really an outstander there that deserves to make the playoff, in my opinion, especially seeing what's happened to Oklahoma the last couple of years in the playoff. Pac-12, I'm not a big Pac-12 fan. Straight off the bat, like, if you know me, I'm a huge SEC guy, and then after that, Big 10. I don't really like the ACC. I like the Big 12, but Pac-12, I just don't like the play style and everything, and I just don't think straight up the teams are that good. So if the Pac-12 teams, like if Oregon loses a game or two, and there's no really outstander in that conference from the Pac-12, sure, Cincinnati could make it. It depends on what's going on, because right now it's looking like you're gonna have Alabama, you're gonna have Ohio State, you're gonna have Clemson. So now you're just looking at that SEC 2 team like Georgia or Florida, or maybe like a Texas A&M, the Big 10 2 team like Michigan, maybe Wisconsin, maybe, I don't know about Minnesota anymore, maybe Penn State, but they got to win this weekend versus Ohio State. And then you're looking at this group of 5 team who's undefeated. You're going to have Cincinnati and BYU both undefeated at the end of the season, in my opinion. And you're going to have to choose between which group of 5 team makes it. I think personally Cincinnati just makes it just off of the quality of their conference. They're playing better opponents than BYU is. But that doesn't take away anything from BYU of how good they are. I just think Cincinnati, if any group of 5 team is going to make the playoff this year, I think it's definitely going to be Cincinnati. Coming in at my number 17, I have the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And for one reason, like, I obviously have a couple one-loss teams ahead of them. They're undefeated, but I just haven't seen them have a real quality win against a good team. They beat Tulsa. That was a 16-7 win against Tulsa. They beat West Virginia 27-13. They have a pretty decent win against Kansas, but Kansas is not a good team. Their game against Baylor gets postponed, and then they just beat Iowa State only 24-21. Now, Iowa State is a ranked team, but that was a team that at the beginning of the season lost to Louisiana Lafayette. They really got to have that defining win for me to really push them up in the standings. They play Texas this week at home. Then they go to Kansas State, and then they go to Oklahoma. 3 games there. If they lose one of those games, I don't see them making the playoff. I don't see any Big 12 team making the playoff. So they're going to really have to step up in these games. These are all big games for them, huge games for Oklahoma State to prove to me that they are a good team. I want Oklahoma State to do good. Don't get me wrong. Chuba, Hubbard, I'm Canadian. Like, straight off the bat, I'm Canadian, and I want to see Canadians do well. So it would be awesome to see a Canadian be in the college football playoff, but I really just got to see Oklahoma State beat a good team by a good amount to be able to put them over these next 2 teams I have in my first 2 out. Coming in at my number 6 for my first 2 out, so these are my 6 and 5 teams. I have the Texas A&M Aggies. They have the big win against Florida. Obviously, they lose to Alabama, but Alabama is one of the best teams in the nation. No question about it. That offense is legit. So you got to take that and just analyze it and take that into account that they lost to like one of the best teams in the nation. That is their one loss. Other than that, they had a close game against Vandy to open up the season. But after that, they beat Florida, and then they just beat Mississippi State this past weekend. They go to Arkansas this week, or no, they play at home versus Arkansas. I've said this in my SEC predictions. I predict this being a lot closer of a game than many people think. Arkansas is a good team this year, and I feel like they're going to be competitive in this game, but I do feel like Texas A&M is going to come out with it in the fourth quarter. They're going to run away with this game, and they should be able to win it. After that, they go to South Carolina, go to Tennessee, versus Mississippi, versus LSU, at Auburn. Texas A&M could easily run the table here, in my opinion, and win out. Will they? They just have to keep playing their style of football, and they just have to be consistent. As long as they're playing consistent, they can definitely win out the rest of the season, and will maybe even be in the playoff hunt. They just have to play consistent, but Texas A&M is a really good team, and I put them over Oklahoma State because they do have that quality win over a very quality Florida team, and their one loss is to Alabama. Next up, we have the other team that has lost to Alabama this season that is in these top 10. We have the Georgia Bulldogs. They beat Arkansas week 1, then they go home and play a very good game against Auburn, beat them 27-6. Then they go and beat Tennessee 44-21, and then they lose to Alabama 41-24. They haven't played a game since that Alabama game. They go to Kentucky this weekend to play Kentucky, obviously. that should be a win for them. Kentucky's really struggling right now. Georgia, I do have them winning that game, and they should win by a decent amount. But this is all just prep for that next game, that next week versus Florida in Jacksonville. That's the season dividing. I already talked about this when I was talking about Florida. This is the SEC East defining game of the season. Must win for Georgia if they want to make the playoffs. Must win for Florida if they want to make the playoffs. So that could really determine how Georgia jumps up these standings in the coming weeks. But for right now, I like where Georgia's at. Although they have lost to Alabama, they're still a very good team and still beating good quality teams. So I put them at my 5 spot. Now going into my top 4 by playoff. At number 4, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Undefeated team, obviously, but I just can't put them. I don't like putting them over Georgia and Texas A&M. I just feel like I have no way to justify a team in the Power 5 being undefeated, even though I have Oklahoma State drop back so far. Notre Dame has that program history that they are a good football team. And Oklahoma State, don't get me wrong, Oklahoma State is a great program and everything. But if you think of the classic programs, like Notre Dame's definitely up there. And I feel like that helps them in this scenario, just that they're able to be so consistent over the coming years, and they made the playoffs 2 years ago. I just feel like I have to put them in, even though I don't want to, but they are in my 4th. They almost lost to Louisville a couple weeks ago. Now they go to Georgia Tech this weekend to play a game. They should win that, but then next week is when they play Clemson at home at 7 o'clock on NBC. That's the game that determines whether Notre Dame is gone out of here or Clemson is gone out of here. I don't see an ACC 2 team making the playoffs. I just don't. When you have a Big Ten 2 team and an SEC 2 team, and then you probably have a group of 5 undefeated team, maybe even 2 group of 5 undefeated teams, I just don't see how the second place team in this conference can get into the playoffs. So that is a must win in my opinion for Notre Dame. It's a must win for Clemson in my opinion too. But Notre Dame's still a good team, don't get me wrong. It's just putting them in the playoffs right now over Georgia and Texas A&M is hard to think about, but it's just because they're undefeated that I felt like I had to give them 4. My number 3 team staying the same. I had them number 3 last week. We have the Ohio State Buckeyes. It was great to see them get back and playing out on the field. Justin Fields is just so much fun to watch. Just the way that he's throwing the ball and the spiral and everything, just the accuracy and everything about him was so much fun to watch. That offense is really good. They were able to win that game 52-17. Although they had a rocky start, I remember watching it and it being like 14-14 at the beginning of the second quarter or something like that. So that was a very close game to start out with, but that game definitely got stretched out as the game went on. Big game this week in Happy Valley versus 18 Penn State. I do have Ohio State winning that game. I feel like Ohio State is definitely the better team, especially that there are no fans here when this would usually be a whiteout. I think that is a huge advantage for Ohio State here. After that, they play Indiana later on in the season, who's ranked, and then they play Michigan last game of the season. I see them, as long as they win this game and as long as they take care of business, especially at home against Michigan, I see Ohio State running the table and making the playoff. No question about it. So Ohio State sticking at 3. They've only played 1 game. I can't really move them up over Clemson and Alabama, but they are still one of the most elite teams in college football. Number 2, I have the Clemson Tigers. I had them 1 last week just because of how dominant they were over Georgia Tech, and I just felt like I couldn't put Alabama over them even though I wanted to. But this week I have them taking a step back. I watched that Clemson game because I'm a South Carolina fan. I watch Clemson games occasionally because I want them to lose. I cheer for them to lose. You always do that with your rival, and Clemson is my least favorite team in college football, but I still got to give them credit where credit is due and give them the spot that they deserve. And in my honest opinion, I feel like it's 2. The game against Syracuse, a game against a 1-4, now 1-5 team, was just so sloppy that Syracuse had a chance to tie the game. Now Clemson was able to pick up a scoop and score, but I feel like Syracuse beat themselves up in that game because they're just not a very good football team. But if this game was like last year versus this North Carolina game, like that game was close. If this North Carolina team played in this game against Clemson, I feel like North Carolina could have won that because Clemson was just not playing some sound football. I just felt like if you put a better team than Syracuse in that game would have been a lot closer, and got a lot more attention from the media. But I watched that game, and Clemson was not playing to the best of their abilities. I know that Clemson can play very, very well. I know that offense with Trevor Lawrence, even though I hate to say it, can be very, very lethal at sometimes. And I just wasn't seeing that against a 1-4 Syracuse team. So I decided to drop them back because my number one team has just been playing some really good football against really good teams, and their offense is so good. Of course, I'm talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide. Jalen Waddle goes out in the Tennessee game on the opening kickoff. That is detrimental to them. Never want to see that. Jalen Waddle is definitely one of the most, if not the most explosive players in college football. But they still got Devontae Smith. They still got John Mechie on that receiving core. And those two guys alone, I feel like, are definitely one of the better receiving duos in all of college football. They beat Texas A&M. They beat Georgia. They beat Tennessee, who are all good teams. They beat Missouri. They beat Mississippi. They go and play Mississippi State at home this weekend, and then they have the big game to Death Valley, LSU. But, like, Alabama's offense is just so crisp, and they just know that they can score on any drive they want to, and that's what they do. Their offense is just too consistent for them to lose ball games right now. As long as the defense is able to come up with the stops that when they need to, Alabama will win out easily because they got no ranked opponents right now on the upcoming schedule. They're going to walk into the SEC championship, get Georgia or Florida, and if they do to Georgia what they did already in that game and are able to keep that second half, how they played in that second half versus Georgia rolling, Alabama's going to win the SEC easy. Mac Jones, Najee Harris. Najee Harris, in my opinion, is best running back in all of college football. I put him over Chuba. I put him over Travis Etienne. And those three right there, I feel like are the most elite running backs in all of college football. But I'd put Najee at the head of that because he's just so good. The way that he's able to create plays and just fight through tackles and break tackles and everything to gain extra yards is a huge, huge help to Alabama this year. I just think Alabama's the number one team in the nation. No question about it. Their defense is shaky, but that offense just cannot be stopped. It cannot be stopped. So that's why I have them at number one. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. Definitely like the video. Definitely drop any comment about anything college football down below. I love talking college football, as you could tell probably. Subscribe, and thank you for watching, and come back next time.